Hello everyone, I am the Lore Explorer, and this video will contain spoilers for Outer Wilds Echoes of the Eye. In today's loop, I want to talk about the Inhabitants. To be honest, I think they're getting a pretty bad rap in the community, and I may have fallen into the same trap. But when I first played through the DLC, I hated the Inhabitants. They silenced the eye signal, they reacted horribly and with disdain to simple truths of the universe, they essentially burned books with reels and retreated from reality entirely, descending into madness. And they imprisoned the single inhabitant who didn't hate the eye with a burning passion. It's only natural to hate them. But if we actually dissect the story and put it under a different lens, the way the inhabitants reacted was only natural too. They were just reacting quite like many of us would, and ultimately, they simply acted human. Which I know may seem like a stark contrast to what I just admitted I felt upon experiencing the story, but as humans, we have this inherent want to judge things based off of our experience and relationship to them. That's just how our brain works. And when I played the game, I judged them that way. Yeah, I hated them. I just didn't like them. But now, I just kind of want to give them a hug. Tell them not to worry and everything is going to be okay. Because let's follow their story knowing what we know as the player. We zoom into a peaceful moon circling a quite mesmerizing ringed planet. Since it orbits a large body, it has long day and night cycles that likely suit owls quite well. And they lived in common wooden houses by the river, no large scientifically advanced society, just simple mothers and fathers caring for their flock. They lazily fished or rafted down rivers to pass time, or they stared up at the night stars just wondering. But it seems they had one unique ability. They seemed to have mastered light in some sort of fundamental way. And one night, while by the river, one of their light collecting devices received a signal and converted that signal into a vision. Literally out of the blue, a giant signal started emitting from the neighboring star system. The historians depict it as actually visible in the sky, but this could just be a symbolic representation. But either way, they did know the symbol, they got it right, and like a giant bell ringing out, the eye appeared in the sky to them, sending them visions through interstellar space. Sadly, we weren't privy to exactly what these visions were, but the visions must have been quite compelling, judging on how they reacted to it. They all put their arms up as if worshipping it, reveling in its light. They seemingly didn't know what it was or what it would do when they got there, but they know it started calling out to them. And it seems, just like with their projection reels that we see in the future, the inhabitants projected all of their hopes and dreams onto this mysterious signal. And before long, they couldn't resist this giant beacon in the sky that they've made into something it isn't. They thought that whatever this signal was, whatever this giant bell in the universe may be, it's worth consuming their entire planet to reach it. It seems they projected godly attributes onto the eye because that's how they treated it. They built churches to it, they cut down every tree, just killing the entire planet's biosphere in the process, all simply to create a ship capable of making the pilgrimage to their newfound object of worship. A leap into faith, per se. Now, all of this seems to be pretty relatable, beyond the magical green fire stuff anyway. All throughout history, humans have ascribed God to things that they don't understand. And if they were capable of trying to reach the sun when they thought it was a god named Apollo, they probably would have tried to do that regardless of what it took. But even so, they didn't want to leave home. They loved their lives, and so they made their ship in the image of their home moon, constructing it as comfortably as possible so they could live just like they did at home. They made the side of the ship a screen so they can still gaze at the night stars. They made all the pathways to locations rivers so they can still raft around for pleasure. They wanted to preserve home, and so they built a stranger in its image in the best way that they could. And to ensure that they remembered everything, they built huge libraries before they left, so they can record everything one last time and keep it forever. They didn't want to forget a single thing about their home, and so they made the reels in the libraries, and they cherished it and didn't want to lose that. But it was a sacrifice that they had to make if they wanted to meet their maker, which, ironically, this time is actually kind of true. We aren't entirely sure how long it took for their voyage to get to the eye, but it's safe to say ages passed, maybe even centuries. Surely enough time to begin missing the giant ring planet that reminds you of home. All to go find the eye of the universe. And after so long, when they finally get there after sacrificing literally everything they love, what does the eye reward them with? Immediately showing them the universe dying with them along with it. The heat death of the universe, and they die. When I first saw the vision and saw how the inhabitants reacted to it, I was sure they must have misinterpreted the whole thing. It made no sense to me. The eye doesn't end the universe, it creates a new one after our universe dies naturally. We've seen it happen. Like, sure, the universe dies pretty quickly, and you die along with the universe, but from your remains, from your memories, life starts to grow again. And this happens naturally at the end of the universe. There was nothing left to destroy when this happened. So I thought this was a symbolic vision, and the inhabitants just didn't understand what the eye was trying to convey to them. But the recent update has given me a bit more perspective. The inhabitants didn't misinterpret anything. The object that called out to them sent them visions through interstellar space, made them give up home and live a risky life in an interstellar ship, all while they've never seen a quantum wibbly in their life. And as soon as they scanned this object, it showed them nothing beautiful, nothing godly, only their death and the universe ending. And they immediately recoiled in fear, in horror. I mean, they were just terrified. They never even finished the vision. They're owls. Of course they get spooked easy. They gave up so much for what? The knowledge everyone and everything in the universe is going to die? In this lens, it's kind of hard to be mad at them for, reacting in fear. They took a leap into faith, foolish or not, and they gave up everything. They must have felt so forsaken, so confused. They were simple folks who liked lanterns and raft rides, and now a quantum black hole they thought was God is showing them that they and the universe is dying. Or gonna die. And what's worse, they have some part in this hairy nonsense. They die in the vision, and it's their skull right next to the symbol with the grass growing out of it and everything. And so they did what any reasonable person would do. Be terrified, and then try not to die. First, they silenced the eye signal so no one would ever have to go through this horror again. And so hopefully it no longer acts as a beacon reminding them of what's already happened. Then, they got the heck out of Dodge as quickly as they could. But, while everyone was working on silencing the eye signal, one inhabitant got a bit cheeky. The prisoner seemed to have noticed that their leader recoiled in fear before the vision was even over, and they were brave. They wanted to know what this vision had to tell them, and so they watched that vision before the stranger departed the eye. And, for their bravery, they got rewarded with a magnificent premonition. After the grass begins to grow on the inhabitant's skull, a stalk begins to peek out of the skull's eye, and a flower eventually sprouts from this stalk. And from this flower, that is the eye of the universe, the prisoner can see many galaxies being birthed anew. I'm sure the prisoner probably tried to tell the others of its magnificence, but come on, who wants to die and let grass grow out of their skeleton? I mean, no one's saying that's who. Forget how pretty that flower is, right? Let's be reasonable here and try to work out how not to die, how to survive past the heat death of the universe. And so that's what they did. They needed to move closer to our sun and park there to gather its energy after such a long journey. But after that, they were sort of at a loss for what to do. They can't go home, that's gone now, they've destroyed it, and while parked, they have a look at the nearby solar system that they find themselves in which they surely realize there's new life sprouting. And, they ponder it all. This is pointless. This whole solar system, pointless. They'll never evolve into something meaningful because they're all going to die. And it's not like they can just go save or warn everyone in the universe. They don't have a home to return to. So what are they supposed to do now? It's hard for me to even imagine how, difficult that would be to bear on your shoulders. This knowledge would just simply be too much. And so they break down in grief and turn to the only thing that they can think of for comfort. Reels of home. But this only served to sadden them even more. They begin to feel the weight even deeper of the universe on their shoulders. What they've done. And they just contemplate it all. And time's a funny thing. After a while, it gets heavier, and eventually, they just can't deal with the hand they've been dealt at all, especially not after what they gave up. But they do have one thing left: their salvation, their light tech. They have the ability to scan their consciousness, recall every last bit of home, and simulate it through computers, and then use their vision staffs they have to project this fake reality onto digital walls around them. This would allow them to retreat from reality entirely and just live blissfully as if they were at home, feeling the wind and grass again, rafting down from town to town. And I mean, the universe is ending. They might as well be happy as possible, right? I mean, this isn't so illogical. And so they constructed the simulation to be as convincing as can be. Feelings, love, as complex as real life, just in every aspect needed to convince themselves that the simulation's real. They risked life and limb to build this simulation. I mean, an elk literally died for it, and probably more than one. And just to have that little extra bit of comfort and bliss before they die. They can even try to forget entirely about the eye and just pretend that they're at home and none of this ever happened. It was all a dream. And honestly, if long enough time passes, that's what would happen. This is logical and sound. To me, at least, it seems like an actually reasonable response to the reality that's been presented to them. And they even set up their ship to take energy from the sun for as long as it can, monitor the sun, and when the sun starts to get dangerous, they program the stranger to automatically leave at the last moment to ensure both their safety and longevity of energy. Completely logical. This way, they can go on living in bliss and not have to deal with the burden of reality for as long as possible. They'd be alive in some aspect for as long as possible. And everything was going exactly to plan for a long while. But all the while, one of the inhabitants sort of isolated themselves inside the simulation. They didn't agree with the other inhabitants. They knew there was more to reality than the others did. And the prisoner, all alone on their little island, probably spent a lot of their time looking up at the fake stars and remembering that this is a false reality. They pass most of their time by thinking about the eye's vision and the beauty held within, envisioning what it'd be like to actually experience that for themselves. It was so meaningful to them that they painted a mural of it to ensure that they remembered. They kept a symbol of the eye in the sim, even though the others have burned or destroyed theirs and they know that it's kind of sacrilege to have it. And just like when they left home, the prisoner didn't want to forget any of this. And after a while, this knowledge burned at the prisoner. It seems the prisoner was a little sneaky boy too, because they eventually found their way inside the Starlit Cove's hidden symbol room, which held the access codes to the eye signal blocker's controls room. They probably planned to sneak away and turn the signal blocker off while everyone else was distracted in the sim, and then they'd try to steal a ship from the docking bay and try their luck at fleeing and finding the eye with its signal blaring while everyone else is still distracted in the sim. An action the rest of their kind would view as mad, but to them it was perfectly logical. Or perhaps they just wanted to free it for a simpler purpose to allow others to find it. But it turns out it was all only a dream, at least for a little bit. The other inhabitants were on the ball. The prisoner wasn't so sneaky after all. While the inhabitants were doing their best to forget reality, it always kept poking through the extremely realistic simulated walls they put around themselves. They just couldn't forget, and so they were on to the prisoner from the start. And now that the prisoner has been caught trying to free the eye signal, the prisoner's mere sight will forever remind the other inhabitants of the eye now, the one thing in the universe that they wanted to forget entirely. They constructed their whole civilization to forget entirely. If the prisoner had 2 antlers, maybe the other inhabitants would have been a bit more understanding. Maybe they'd hoped to forget and hoped the prisoner blended in one day after 10,000 years or so. But this was the one inhabitant who will never blend in, because they had a broken antler. So in short, in a simulated reality where the inhabitants were trying to blissfully forget real reality, the prisoner is now linked with the thing that made them go mad to begin with. And so they treat the prisoner in the same way they did the eye. They do the best they can to forget that. Not only the event, not only its precursor event, but the prisoner entirely. The prisoner now serves as a symbolic representation of their memory, of everything bad that's ever happened to them, and the inhabitants lock that away as deeply as they could in their metaphorical memory of the sim. But remember, the inhabitants want to preserve home. They can't bear to erase a single slide of it. And even Alex Beecham, the lead developer, confirmed that their fear of losing information is just as bad as dying to the inhabitants. And the prisoner is information. And so they do the best they can to preserve this knowledge and information in the sim while also hiding it away from themselves. They lock the prisoner in an underground vault, digitally scan the rails in the real world, and build the forbidden archives in the sim. They burn the eye silencing probe controls in the real world and even the prisoner's digital home for good measure. They were going to retreat into the sim forever and ensure nothing like this could ever happen again, while at the same time going through immense great measures to keep these archives of their home and history digitally preserved somewhere. Their story, as the prisoner says. But because what their story contains, they're hiding it from themselves. Even other inhabitants included. They weren't expecting us when we entered the sim. They were reacting as they do if another AUK or inhabitant is trying to access the archives. They were willing to kill a fellow inhabitant for the sin of wanting to learn their own history. But, listen, to be honest, it's kind of for their own benefit. It's the kindest outcome. The knowledge they hold, those reels and the prisoner holds, hurts so deeply they were willing to sacrifice their physical body for digital bliss. Think about it. As soon as the prisoner realized that there weren't the only ones in the universe with this knowledge, that they weren't, bearing it on their shoulders alone, they immediately deloaded from the sim. And it seems some of the other inhabitants were just cruel. They didn't want to let the prisoner forget. Yeah, they had them locked away in a tower and all that, but they went so far as to taunt them by reminding them of home, of reality, with a ringed planet out the window, always shining light into their tower, therefore always reminding them that this isn't reality, especially by leaving the telescope and ringed planet outside of their window, since they'd be able to look at the planet deeper and realize that's not real, there's no other stars, what's going on here, this isn't reality. But even this isn't the end of the story of the inhabitants. They got even more paranoid over time. They constructed their sim to hide their history with invisible bridges or passes that everyone would forget about. They added auto sentries just to straight up deload any inhabitant who tried to access the reels. And they went on patrol to prevent anyone from visiting these locations if they got past these sentries. They even set up traps on the stranger to ensure anyone who leaves the sim or ends up finding this stranger altogether and finding the glitches couldn't access or use this knowledge, which does paint a picture of a bit of a stretch of time before their real bodies died and they kind of set up shop in the sim. But they even set up traps and codes in the real world to maybe use or access someday. But they ended up burning them after an unknown event, which is the only time in history that the AUKs actually destroyed information. So it must have been a huge event. And probably, in my mind, I think it's just being frustrated by seeing them after so long. Even the vault's code's existence reminded them of the prisoner, and they wanted to forget that, and so they burned them. But that's just my guess. And this all seems so extreme to us, but imagine that you've come to the understanding that the universe was ending any cosmic minute. You destroyed your home to find what you projected all of your hopes and dreams on, and it disappointed you terribly. It's only natural to want to forget that. And the inhabitants were actually able to do so. Or at least they gave it the good old college try. So who are we to blame them? These aren't good traits to be praised. But if I had one wish in the universe, it'd be to go back and hug this inhabitant before they watch the vision. Just hug them, tell them it'll be okay. Just keep your head up, keep your chin up, soldier, and face the scary things, because eventually the scary parts end one way or the other. And it'll be entirely possible that beauty sits on the other side of that if you actually face it. But if you run in fear from it, it's possible that that fear will torture you forever. But alas, even the lore explorer can't time travel into a fictional universe and hug an easily frightened owl creature to, comfort them. And instead, we got to witness their descent into madness that we see presented in the game. Luckily for us, the prisoner had the resilience and perseverance to hang on just a little longer through the tough parts of existence, and in the end, it was worth it for them and the universe. It was different than they envisioned it would be after all those years in the isolation tower picturing it, but they got to add their essence to the next universe through us at the campfire in the ancient glade. And we were brave enough to let them join us, knowing what their species did and how that may affect things. But it turns out the universe isn't petty at all. The Eye doesn't hold a grudge. 14.3 billion years later, the next species we see that is inspired by the inhabitants were initially reclusive, living underground and away from other life. But eventually, they were brave enough to poke their head out of their cave systems and come say hi to the more rambunctious bug creatures on the surface, who seem to camp under the stars as if they're fearless. And together, who knows what they can do. They're no longer so easily spooked, and so, in the end, even the inhabitants had to do what they did and go through what they went through to have this new, beautiful universe that we see presented to us 14.3 billion years later. I mean, think about it. What would the universe be like if it was based on the other inhabitants' memories instead of ours? So it turns out, even though there were some horrid fates in the universe had it just right in the end. But that's about all I want to talk about today. Hopefully I earn the inhabitants a bit of sympathy, and I hope you agree with my interpretation. If you liked the video, consider liking and subscribing to the channel for more in-depth analysis of Outer Wilds. And if you want to give me a follow on Twitter, I just kind of made one and became a little bit more active there. I think I have some cool stuff I can present in Twitter format, so come check it out if you're interested. But mostly, I just want to thank you all for being here with me so far, making it to the end of the video, or just watching it all, so thank you. As usual, a huge thank you to the members here on the channel. Thanks to you guys, I'm starting to set up an office of sorts, and it's just... I've always kind of wanted this, and instead of me being in my own dang little room, I'm going to have an office, and it's going to be great. So thanks so much. I can't thank you all enough for supporting me and affording me this opportunity. So genuinely, thank you. And as always, this is a lore explorer diving deep into the lore so you don't have to. And also ready to give a spooked owl a hug any day, but that's neither here nor there. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.